Welcome to Faith Wonders, where real stories of faith and miracles come alive from around the world.
This is a story that challenges everything we know about justice, faith, and miracles. Before the world called him a criminal, before his name became a number inside a cold prison cell, Michael Carter was simply a boy, a son, sitting beside his mother in the back pew of St. Mary's Church every Sunday morning. The air always smelled of old wood and candle wax. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting colors on their faces, blue, red, and gold. And beside him, his mother, Maria, would whisper the same prayer she had learned from her own mother. Our Lady never abandons her children. Michael would watch her fingers move over the small rosary beads, one after another, her lips moving in silent faith. He was only 8 when he asked, "Mom, does she really hear us?" Maria smiled softly. "She hears you, my son, even when no one else does." But the church bells that once marked their Sundays would one day be replaced by the sound of sirens. When Michael turned 16, the quiet rhythm of family life began to break. His father had left years earlier. Bills piled up. The neighborhood grew harder, rougher. The same streets where he once played with a soccer ball became ruled by gangs. Boys his age, faces hard, voices sharp. At first, he only watched. But watching turned into running errands. Errands turned into debts, and debts turned into loyalty. Faith was replaced by fear, the rosary by a gun. Maria begged him to stop. "Michael, you don't have to walk this path," she said one night, tears filling her tired eyes. "Mom, you don't understand," he snapped. "It's too late." But deep inside, the boy who once prayed beside her was still there, buried under guilt, shame, and the desperate need to survive. By 18, Michael had already been arrested 3 times. Petty theft, assault, illegal possession. Each time he promised his mother it would be the last. Each time she waited outside the police station, holding her rosary, whispering prayers for her son's soul. But fate, or perhaps something darker, had other plans. One rainy night, when Michael was 25, a robbery went wrong. A single gunshot echoed through the narrow alley. When the smoke cleared, a police officer, Patrick O'Connor, lay motionless on the ground. Michael was found at the scene, weaponless, terrified, shouting, "It wasn't me! I didn't shoot!" But in the chaos that followed, his words vanished into the storm. The evidence seemed undeniable. His fingerprints were on a stolen car. His jacket matched a witness description. No one wanted to listen, not to a man with a record. The trial lasted only 2 months. The prosecutor painted him as a monster. The defense, a tired public attorney, could barely keep up. And when the jury returned after only 4 hours of deliberation, everyone already knew the verdict. "Michael Carter," said Judge Marshall, voice cold and steady, "you have been found guilty of the murder of Officer Patrick O'Connor. This court sentences you to the maximum penalty allowed by law." In the silence that followed, a faint cry broke through the courtroom. It was Maria. Her body gave way, collapsing in grief, clutching her rosary as if it could stop time. Michael tried to reach for her, but guards held him back. "Mom!" he shouted as they dragged him away. "I didn't do it, Mom! You have to believe me!" Her trembling voice followed him down the corridor, soft, desperate, echoing like a prayer fading into darkness. Our Lady never abandons her children. From that day on, Michael's world became 6 square meters of concrete and silence. The only light came from a small window too high to see through. Days blurred into nights, weeks into years. The boy who once dreamed of redemption now felt forgotten, by justice, by the world, even by God. He stopped praying. He stopped hoping. And he stopped believing. But far away, in a small apartment filled with fading pictures and candlelight, Maria never missed a single Sunday. Every week, she carried her small medal of the Virgin Mary, the same one that had belonged to her grandmother, and whispered, "Our Lady, bring my son back to the light." 8 years passed. 8 years of bars, chains, and guilt. 8 years of a mother's unwavering faith. And though Michael didn't know it yet, the Virgin Mary had already begun writing a new chapter in his life, one that would turn despair into redemption and darkness into the brightest miracle ever witnessed behind prison walls. Time moves differently inside a prison. Days stretch like an endless desert, dry, silent, merciless. For Michael Carter, every tick of the clock reminded him of the world he had lost. He woke each morning to the same metallic clang of the cell door, the same tasteless breakfast, the same 4 gray walls. His companions were the shadows, the silence, and the guilt that gnawed at his soul like a slow fire. At night, when the noise of the prison faded, he would lie on his cot and stare at the ceiling, tracing the cracks like constellations. Sometimes he would whisper to himself, not prayers, not curses, just a quiet, broken question. Why, God, if you're real, why did you abandon me? No answer ever came. Only the hum of the fluorescent light above him and the echo of another man's scream from down the corridor. And yet, every week, without fail, she came. Maria Carter, 70 years old, her back now bent, her hands trembling from age, would travel miles to see her son. Through rain, snow, and summer heat, she came. Each visit began the same way. Through a thick glass window, her tired eyes searched for his. She would place her hand on the glass, and he would place his over hers. Separated by glass, but connected by faith. "How are you, my son?" she always asked. "Still here, Mom," Michael would reply, forcing a smile. "Still here." She always carried 2 things, a small rosary and a medal of the Virgin Mary that had belonged to her own grandmother. Before the guards ended each visit, she would say the same words. "Our Lady never abandons her children. Keep praying, Michael." He would nod, but inside, he didn't believe. The prayers felt hollow. Until one day, something changed. That day, a man entered his life who would quietly plant the seed of faith once more. Father Thomas Mackenzie, 68 years old, an Irish priest with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to see right through a man's pain. He wasn't like other chaplains who came to preach. He didn't talk about punishment or sin or hell. He came with stories. Stories about redemption, about men who had fallen deeper than Michael and still found their way back to God. One afternoon, as they sat across from each other in the prison chapel, the room silent except for the faint echo of distant footsteps, Father Mackenzie looked at him and said, "Michael, God knows the truth, even when men fail to find it. The truth doesn't matter here, Father. All that matters is the verdict." The priest smiled gently. "Maybe, but I've seen the impossible happen in these walls. You'd be surprised how mercy can find its way, even through locked doors." At first, Michael didn't believe him, but something about the priest's calm voice lingered in his heart. He began to attend chapel on Sundays, not to pray, just to sit, to listen. The first few times, he sat in the back row, silent, eyes cold. But as weeks turned into months, something inside began to stir. The words of the prayers, words he hadn't spoken since childhood, began to sound familiar again. The rhythm of the rosary reminded him of his mother's hands, moving bead by bead. And one night, back in his cell, he whispered the first prayer he had said in almost a decade. "Hail Mary, full of grace." His voice trembled. He didn't even finish the sentence. But in that moment, something cracked open inside his heart. A small light, fragile but real. By the 5th year of his sentence, the guards began to notice he was changing. He no longer fought. He no longer shouted at night. He began helping other inmates read and write letters to their families. One of them, an old man named Carl, once asked, "What happened to you, Carter? You used to be fire. Now you're calm." Michael smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just tired of fighting." "Nah," the old man said. "You found something. Or someone." Michael looked down at the small wooden rosary his mother had managed to get authorized for him. He said nothing. Then came the 7th year, a night unlike any other. Michael was in his cell, sitting on his cot, holding the small rosary. The prison was silent, only the hum of distant lights. He closed his eyes and began to pray, slowly, carefully, as if rediscovering an old language. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." When he opened his eyes, the air in the cell felt different. He blinked, once, twice, and then saw her. A woman dressed in blue. Days turned into months, and Michael's faith continued to grow quietly, like a seed taking root in dry soil. He no longer prayed because his mother told him to. He prayed because he wanted to, because for the first time in years he felt peace when he did. The guards noticed the change. So did the other inmates. The man who used to curse and shout now spoke gently, often helping the newcomers adjust to prison life. Some mocked him, calling him the priest without a collar. But others, the ones who had lost hope, began to sit near him during prayer hour, listening silently as he whispered the rosary. Father Mackenzie continued to visit him every week. The two men had grown close, not as priest and prisoner, but as two souls walking the same road toward faith. One afternoon, as they sat in the chapel, Michael said quietly, "Father, sometimes I feel like she's still here, watching me." The priest smiled. "That's because she is. The Blessed Mother never leaves those who suffer. Remember that." Michael nodded. He didn't know how to explain it, but ever since the night she appeared, a strange lightness lived in him. It was a cold morning in December when the miracle began. Michael was cleaning the small prayer room next to the chapel, a quiet space where inmates could kneel and reflect. On the wall hung an old faded picture of the Virgin Mary that had been there long before his time. The frame was cracked, the glass dusty, the colors nearly gone. As he wiped it gently with a cloth, he noticed something strange. The face of Mary seemed brighter, the eyes almost alive. At first he thought it was the sunlight reflecting off the glass, but when he stepped aside, the glow didn't fade. He blinked. The light was coming from inside the picture. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was soft, golden, warm like morning sunlight through leaves. He felt his knees weaken, his breath caught in his throat. "Mother Mary," he whispered. The light grew stronger, filling the small room with a gentle radiance. And then a voice, calm and tender, spoke inside his heart. "My child, do not fear. The time of truth is near." Michael fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He stayed there for several minutes, unable to move, overwhelmed by peace. When the light faded, the picture looked as it had before, faded, cracked, old. But something had changed in him. He ran to find Father Mackenzie. The priest listened as Michael told him everything, the glow, the voice, the peace. "It happened again," Michael said. "She spoke to me. She said the time of truth is near." Father Mackenzie took a deep breath. "Then we must be ready. God never sends signs without purpose." The priest decided to report what Michael saw to the warden, not as a miracle, but as a spiritual event. He feared the prison officials might think Michael was delusional, but he couldn't keep silent. Within days, word spread through the prison. Some guards laughed. Some inmates mocked. But a few, those who had witnessed Michael's transformation, believed him. A week later, the second sign came. During evening roll call, one of the guards, Officer Daniels, noticed a faint light coming from the chapel even though it was locked. He thought someone had left a lamp on. When he opened the door, he froze. The same picture of the Virgin Mary was glowing again. This time, others saw it too. Daniels shouted for help. Within minutes, 3 other guards and 2 inmates stood in the doorway, staring at the light that shimmered from the old frame like living fire. No one spoke. No one moved. The air felt thick, almost holy. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. Silence followed. No explanation. No trick. No electric fault. Only awe. The next morning, the warden ordered an inspection. The electricians found nothing unusual. No hidden wires, no reflection sources, nothing. The incident was quietly recorded in the daily log as unexplained light phenomenon, no damage. But among the inmates, the story spread like wildfire. They began calling Michael the man blessed by Mary. Not everyone was happy about it. Some guards mocked him, saying it was all an act to gain sympathy before his next appeal. Others avoided him altogether, afraid of what they didn't understand. But Michael didn't argue. He simply kept praying. He prayed for the guards. He prayed for the prisoners. He even prayed for the man who had testified falsely against him, the man whose lie had sealed his fate. He still didn't know that man's name, but he prayed for him every night. Then came the third sign. Late one night, as Michael sat quietly in his cell, he felt a sudden cold wind sweep through, though the window was shut. He looked up and saw once again a faint blue light forming near the corner of his cell. The same voice, gentle, familiar, spoke again. "Forgive, and you will be free." And then the light faded. Michael bowed his head. Tears fell silently onto his hands. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, he asked Father Mackenzie for paper and pen. He began writing a letter, not to the governor, not to the court, but to the man who had testified against him. He wrote with no anger, no bitterness, only peace. "I forgive you," he wrote, "not because I am strong, but because I have been shown mercy. I pray that one day you will find peace, just as I have." He folded the letter and gave it to the priest. Father Mackenzie promised to deliver it personally. What neither of them expected was what happened next. A week later, that man, the key witness in Michael's case, was found dead in his home, a letter of confession clutched in his hand. In the letter, he admitted that his testimony had been false, that he had been paid to lie, and that Michael Carter was innocent. The news spread quickly. The authorities reopened the case. And for the first time in nearly 8 years, there was hope. Michael didn't celebrate. He simply knelt in his cell, rosary in hand, and whispered, "Thank you, Mother. Thank you." He knew now that the light he had seen wasn't madness. It was mercy. That night, Father Mackenzie came to his cell. He was trembling with emotion. "Michael," he said softly, "your miracle has begun." Michael looked at him, tears in his eyes. "No, Father, her miracle has begun." And in the silence that followed, both men bowed their heads, for they knew that what had happened inside those prison walls was something far greater than any man could explain. When the confession letter was discovered, everything changed. For years, Michael's name had been buried under silence, forgotten by the world. But now, truth had spoken. The district attorney reopened the case. The newspapers caught wind of it, running headlines like, Inmate's vision leads to confession of false witness. Was it a miracle inside prison walls? Reporters tried to reach Michael, but the warden refused to allow interviews. He wanted peace, not spectacle. Inside his cell, Michael remained calm. He didn't ask for release. He didn't demand justice. He prayed. Every night, the same words. Thy will be done. It took 6 long months of legal work, evidence review, and witness testimonies. Then, one morning, just after sunrise, a guard came running to his cell, panting, eyes wide. "Carter, pack your things. The governor signed the order. You're free." Michael didn't move at first. The words didn't feel real. "Free?" he whispered. The guard nodded, smiling slightly. "You're going home, man." As he walked out of the prison gates, the world felt brighter, too bright. The sky seemed endless, the air sharp and alive. He stood there for a moment, eyes closed, breathing in freedom like it was the first breath he had ever taken. Father Mackenzie was waiting for him outside, holding a small bouquet of lilies, white, pure, simple. "Welcome home, son," the priest said. Michael smiled weakly. "Home? I'm not sure I remember what that means anymore." "Then we'll find out together," the priest replied. The first thing Michael did after leaving was visit his mother's grave. Maria Carter had passed away 3 years earlier. She never saw her son free again, but she never stopped believing he would be. Kneeling beside her headstone, Michael placed the small rosary she had given him long ago on the grass. "You were right, Mom," he whispered. "She never left me." For a long moment, he stayed there, tears quietly falling. Then, from nowhere, a gentle breeze brushed across his face, carrying the scent of lilies, just like the ones the priest held. He smiled through his tears. "Thank you," he said softly. In the months that followed, Michael began working at a small church charity in the outskirts of town. He repaired furniture, painted walls, cooked for the poor. Anything that let him serve quietly, away from the noise of the world. But peace was not the only thing that followed him. Strange, beautiful things began to happen around him. A sick child healed after he prayed over her. A broken marriage reconciled after he counseled the couple. And one day, when the church roof caught fire, the flames mysteriously stopped just before reaching the Virgin Mary statue, leaving everything else charred. People began to whisper that God had sent him back for a reason. Some called him the man of miracles, but Michael never took credit. "It's not me," he would say. "It's her, the Blessed Mother. She's the one who works through me." Despite the quiet life he built, one thing still haunted him: the memory of his years in prison. Sometimes, at night, he would wake up sweating, hearing the clang of metal doors in his dreams. One evening, while praying alone in the church, he looked up and saw the same faint blue light that had appeared in his cell years ago. It shimmered near the altar, soft and calm. And once again, he heard her voice, tender, gentle, loving. "My child, I freed your body so that your soul may serve. Do not hide what I have done." Michael fell to his knees. He understood. He was not meant to stay silent anymore. Soon after, with the guidance of Father Mackenzie, he began visiting prisons around the country. He spoke not as a preacher, but as a witness, a man who had seen mercy in its purest form. He told the prisoners, "You are never too far gone for God. I was lost, angry, broken, and yet He found me through her. Even in the darkest cell, light can enter." Many hardened men wept when they heard his story. Some returned to faith after years of disbelief. And in every prison he visited, he left a small wooden rosary, a symbol of hope. One day, after a talk in a rural prison, a young inmate approached him. The boy was trembling, his eyes red. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I lied in court. I sent an innocent man to jail. I can't sleep. I can't eat." Michael placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Then tell the truth, son. The truth will cost you, but it will set you free." The boy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Will God forgive me?" "He already has," Michael said. "Now you must forgive yourself." Years passed. Michael grew older, his hair turning gray. He continued to serve the poor, to pray for the lost, to speak for mercy. But even as age slowed his body, the light in his eyes never dimmed. Every morning he prayed before the same picture of the Virgin Mary, the one that had once glowed in his prison cell, now restored and hanging in his home. And sometimes, when he looked at her face, she could almost swear she was smiling. On the 10th anniversary of his release, Father Mackenzie visited him one last time. The old priest was frail now, his voice weak. "You've done well, Michael," he said. "You turned your pain into purpose." Michael smiled. "It was never my doing, Father. I only followed where she led me." The priest nodded, his eyes shining with peace. "Then you've understood everything." That night, as the stars shone quietly above, Michael knelt in prayer and whispered his last words of gratitude. "Mother Mary, thank you for never leaving me. Thank you for showing me that even in darkness there is light." When dawn came, they found him still kneeling, peaceful, smiling, rosary in hand. And on the wall behind him, that same old picture of the Virgin Mary glowed once more, softly, gently, like a final farewell. When news spread of Michael Carter's passing, people from all over came to the small town where he had lived his final years. He had left quietly, without fame, without money, yet the peace that surrounded his name drew thousands. Former prisoners, priests, nuns, mothers, and men who had once lived in darkness all came to say goodbye. They didn't come because he was a saint. They came because he had shown them that redemption was possible. At the funeral mass, Father Mackenzie, now old and trembling, delivered his final homily. He stood before the altar, his eyes wet with emotion, the same framed image of the Virgin Mary resting beside Michael's coffin. "We all witnessed a miracle," the priest said softly, "but not only the one that freed him from prison. The true miracle was how he freed others, from guilt, from hatred, from despair. Our Lady chose him not because he was perfect, but because he was broken enough to understand mercy." A deep silence filled the church. Some wept openly, others simply bowed their heads in prayer. After the Mass, the coffin was carried to the cemetery. As they lowered it into the ground, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, sharp and pure, landing directly on the image of the Virgin Mary held by Father Mackenzie. Someone in the crowd gasped. "Look," a woman whispered, "it's shining again." Indeed, the small picture that had once glowed in a prison cell now shimmered faintly in daylight, as though touched by a hand unseen. The crowd fell to their knees. No one spoke, only the sound of wind moving gently through the trees. Months passed, and Michael's story began to travel far beyond that small town. A journalist who had once reported on his case wrote a full book about it, The Prisoner and the Virgin. It became a global bestseller, translated into more than 20 languages. People who read it spoke of how it changed their faith, how it made them believe again. One reader in Argentina said, "I was ready to end my life. Then I read about Michael Carter. Now I pray again every night." A prisoner in the Philippines wrote a letter to the journalist. "I saw light in my cell after reading his story. Maybe the Virgin is with me too." In Italy, a small chapel was built in Michael's memory. Above the altar hangs a replica of the image that had saved him, with the words carved beneath it in Latin, Lux Misericordiae, the light of mercy. As years went by, scientists tried to study the original image. They found no special materials, no hidden lights, no explanation. One researcher, after months of examination, finally admitted, "What happened cannot be explained by our instruments. The light we recorded was not from any known source. The church, cautious as always, opened a canonical investigation. Witnesses were interviewed, guards, the warden, Father Mackenzie, even David Walsh before his death. All testimonies matched perfectly. The church concluded,
"A sign of grace occurred, a manifestation of the Virgin's intercession." They didn't label it a miracle, but they didn't deny it either. Faith, after all, doesn't need proof. One night, many years later, Father Mackenzie sat alone in his rectory, looking at the photo of Michael. He was 92 now, his hands shaking as he poured himself tea. He whispered to the picture, "You were right, my son. The truth always comes to light." Then he turned to the small image of Our Lady that sat on his desk, the same one that had once shone in the prison. It glowed softly again, just for a moment. The priest smiled, closed his eyes, and breathed his last. When the nuns found him the next morning, he was still sitting peacefully in his chair, a serene expression on his face. The cup of tea beside him was still warm. Years later, pilgrims began to visit Michael's old home, where the image of the Virgin Mary was kept. They came to pray, to touch the frame, to leave flowers and letters. Many claimed that miracles happened there. Illnesses cured, hearts healed, lives changed. No one knows how many are true, but those who left said the same thing. There is peace here, the kind you can feel. Today, decades after Michael's death, his story continues to move across generations and continents. In churches and prisons alike, his name is still spoken in whispers of gratitude. Somewhere in the quiet of a cell, another man kneels, clutching a small rosary, whispering words that once saved a soul. Virgin Mary, Mother of God and our Mother, intercede for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. And perhaps, in that moment, a faint blue light begins to glow again, unseen but felt, gentle but powerful, reminding the world that mercy never dies. Because even behind walls, even within darkness, the light of Our Lady's compassion still finds its way through. And it never fades. Time moved on. Seasons came and went. The world changed, but her light never did. In a quiet corner of Michael Carter's hometown, a small candle still burns before the image of the Virgin Mary. It's simple, a wooden frame, faded with age, resting on a modest altar surrounded by fresh flowers and handwritten prayers. Every morning, someone new comes to light that candle. A mother praying for her son, a prisoner's wife praying for forgiveness, a lost soul searching for peace. And every night, when the church doors close, the flame continues to flicker, as if it refuses to let darkness win. Michael's story has long outlived him. There are no statues built in his name, no grand memorials carved in stone. Only lives changed, hearts softened, and faith reborn in places where hope once died. In one small chapel in South America, a mural shows the Virgin Mary standing in a prison cell, her hand resting on a man's shoulder. Beneath the painting are words written in gold. Where mercy enters, walls crumble. Every pilgrim who visits that chapel hears the same story, of a condemned man, an image that glowed, and a truth that came too late, yet right on time. Some say miracles are rare. Others say they never happened at all. But perhaps miracles are not flashes of light or voices from heaven. Perhaps they are the quiet transformations of the human heart, the moment hatred turns to love, despair to hope, guilt to forgiveness. If that is true, then the greatest miracle of all was not the glowing image, nor the confession, nor the freedom that followed. It was the mercy that lived on, in every life touched by one man's faith. Years later, a young priest visiting the shrine noticed an old man praying alone. His hair was white, his hands trembling as he held a small rosary. When the priest approached, the man smiled faintly. "Do you believe in miracles, Father?" he asked. "I do," the priest answered softly, "because I've seen one." The old man nodded, eyes distant, as if remembering something far away. He looked up at the image of the Virgin Mary and whispered, "Then you understand." A tear slipped down his cheek, not of sorrow, but of peace. When the priest looked back again, the man was gone. Only the faint smell of lilies lingered in the air. Centuries may pass, names may fade, but the story of Michael Carter and the miracle inside that cold, forgotten cell will continue to echo. Wherever faith trembles, wherever hearts break, wherever people feel abandoned. Because mercy has no prison walls, grace has no chains, and love, once given by heaven, never dies. So when you pray, pray with faith. When you lose hope, remember her light. And when everything seems impossible, look toward the one who never abandons her children. For Our Lady still walks among us, still listens, still shines. And her mercy is eternal. Years after the events that changed his life, Michael Carter's story continued to ripple across the world like circles expanding from a single drop of grace. In 2023, a documentary crew traveled to the same prison where the miracle first took place. The old building was abandoned now, its walls cracked and gray, its halls filled with silence and dust. But when the cameras entered the corridor of cell 47, something strange happened. The lights flickered, and for just a moment the room brightened, not with electricity, but with a soft golden glow that no one could explain. The cameraman froze. "Did you see that?" he whispered. When the footage was later reviewed, that brief shimmer was still there, a gentle radiance pulsing exactly where Michael had once knelt in prayer. The producer included it in the final film, calling it The Light That Returned. The documentary spread online, reaching millions of viewers in just weeks. Comments poured in from around the world. "I was in prison once. His story made me believe again. My son was lost in drugs. I showed him this, and he started praying. I felt the same warmth while watching. It wasn't just a story. It was real." One viewer wrote simply, "The light didn't appear to show a miracle. It appeared to remind us that mercy never leaves." And just like that, the miracle that had once saved one man began saving countless others. Meanwhile, the original image of the Virgin Mary, the one that glowed in Michael's cell, remained in his family's care. It now hung in a small glass case in the home of his daughter, Anna Carter, a quiet woman in her 40s. She never sought attention. She avoided interviews. But every year, on October 18th, the date her father was meant to die, she opened her home to strangers. They came not to see her, but to pray before the image that once shone in the dark. One evening, as Anna was closing the door after the last visitor, a young boy lingered behind. He looked nervous, holding a letter in his hands. "Miss Carter," he said softly, "my brother's in prison. He says he doesn't believe in anything anymore. Could I borrow this picture just for one day?" Anna looked at the boy, at his trembling hands, his hopeful eyes, and she smiled. "You don't need to borrow it," she said, touching the glass gently. "Just take a photo and tell him to pray with faith. That's all it takes." The boy nodded and snapped a picture with his phone. As he turned to leave, Anna glanced once more at the image. For a second, maybe less, the faint blue glow returned. Not bright, not blinding, just enough to make her heart tremble. "Still with us," she whispered. "Always." A few weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from the boy's brother, written on rough prison paper, smudged with tears. "Miss Carter, I don't know why I'm writing this. I didn't believe in miracles. I didn't believe in anything. But that night, when my brother showed me the picture, I prayed for the first time in years.
The next morning, I was called to the warden's office. They found new evidence. I'm going home. Tell your father thank you. Tell the lady thank you. I am free. Anna read the letter again and again, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it gently and placed it beside the image, another testimony in the growing collection of prayers and miracles. Over time, a small chapel was built near Anna's home. People began calling it the Chapel of the Light. Inside, engraved on marble beneath the altar, were the words that defined her father's life. The truth always comes to light. Every day, candles are lit there. Every night, prayers echo through its walls. Some whispered in joy, others in tears, all in faith. One winter evening, a pilgrim who had traveled across the ocean stood before the image and whispered, "If you're really there, show me that mercy still lives." He closed his eyes and prayed silently. And in that moment, though the chapel was nearly dark, a faint glimmer danced across the image, once more, soft, golden, alive. Those who were there said it was only the reflection of candlelight. Others said it was her, Our Lady, visiting once again, as she had done so many times before. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. Her light was still here, guiding, healing, forgiving. And so the story lives on, passed from voice to voice, from screen to screen, from heart to heart. Not as a legend, not as a myth, but as a testimony. A reminder that no soul is too lost, no sin too great, and no darkness too deep for the mercy of the Virgin Mary to reach. Because somewhere tonight, behind the cold walls of another prison, a man kneels in silence, clutching a small rosary, whispering the same words that once opened heaven's door. Our Lady, Mother of Mercy, never abandon me. And somewhere, unseen, a gentle blue light flickers once more, the eternal testimony of love that no wall can contain.
And so, the story ends, not with thunder, not with glory, but with a quiet light that never fades. Michael Carter's journey reminds us that even in the deepest darkness, a single act of faith can open heaven's door. That forgiveness is stronger than hatred, that mercy is never too late. Maybe right now, someone watching this is lost, feeling unworthy, or searching for a sign from heaven. If that's you, remember, grace never leaves. It waits for you patiently, in silence, in prayer, in love. Because miracles don't end when stories end. They begin when hearts believe again. If this story touched your heart, don't let the light stop here. Share this video with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment with your prayer or miracle story. And subscribe to Faith Wonders, where every story reminds us that faith still moves mountains and love still heals the world. Together, let's keep the wonder of faith alive.